All right, so perfect. So we are recording now. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to go ahead and just hand the floor over to Paul Skog. Paul, take it away.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Skog. I'm the product manager for the Microchip Sync Server S600 series of network time servers. I appreciate your taking the time out of the day today to tune in and listen to this presentation. So let me tell you what we're going to be covering here. Go to the next slide. So here's our agenda. Of course, there's the Sync Server S600 and the web interface that we use to control it. So I'm going to give you a big picture in terms of the context that the Sync Server S600 network time server operates in out there in the enterprise space. I'm going to talk about, how it specifically meets certain things when it comes to like accuracy, reliability, and security. I'm going to talk a little about some of the specific details of the unit. I'm going to try and keep this real high level. I'm going to try and keep it interesting for you. I'm not going to go into some of the little nuances of it. And then I'm going to cover some of the options on the Sync server. And along the way, I'm going to pause and I'm going to give you a little demo of the Sync server, and that'll probably be towards the end. And also, I've got a little sort of virtual hands-on thing to show you that I think you might find very interesting as we go along. So with that, let's just look at the big picture for data center timing. Okay, so if we think of a data center, in one case, certainly it's a big building. It has lots of servers in it, but more often than not, a lot of those servers are co-located and they're owned by different organizations. And so, a bank may have a rack of equipment in there, and they call that their data center. And for that rack of equipment, they may need, precise timing for it. And so you get a whole collection of servers all co-located at one place. Now, each one of these organizations that's in there more than likely needs accurate time for some reason or another. And that's where things like network operations, and probably the number one reason why customers want a network time server on their network has to do with log file timestamp accuracy. I'll cover that coming up. But then there's aspects of network security that need accurate timing. And then, of course, there's just the idea that you want the correct time on your, whether it's on your phone or it's on your email or whatever the case may be. So what do customers do right now? I would venture to say that most customers actually go, okay, I need accurate time, and I'm just going to go get it for free from the internet. I'm going to go out the firewall through port 123, and it's pretty easy to find the IP addresses of network time servers out there on the internet that you can synchronize and get the time from. And there's no question that free is a nice aspect. However, it is risky. And it really isn't a sales pitch as much as it's just the reality of when you choose to get time from, essentially it's an IP address somewhere out there on the internet that'll respond to an NTP packet. There's a question of accuracy, security, and reliability. Is that time accurate? It's not your clock. It's just an IP address out there somewhere. It's not going to tell you, like through an SNMP trap, whether it's having troubles or not. You don't know whether that device is secure. Certainly the packets going across the internet are not secure. I'm not sure if you realize this, but the timestamps inside an NTP packet are in the clear. So they can be manipulated between your data center and that clock. And then there's a question of reliability. It's not your clock, it's someone else's, and do they care how reliable that time is? And so those are some aspects that really need serious consideration. And how important those three items are when it comes to timekeeping on your network. And so the solution, of course, that we offer here that answers the questions of accuracy, security, and reliability is going to take a Sync Server S600. You'll put it inside a rack there. And to get the time, it needs to get the time from GPS or the GNSS satellite constellation. And so you run an antenna outside. That antenna is about the size of a small coffee cup. And you have a cable that goes from the Sync server out to that antenna, and the antenna's on the roof somewhere. All right. And it's just important to understand that just because you don't want a customer thinking that they're just going to plug the sync server in and it's going to automatically have accurate time. It's getting its time from the GPS satellite constellation. So that, of course, is the main application for where the sync server finds its home there in the data center. So if we say, okay, let's just look at a broader picture for the S600 for the enterprise, you basically start talking about how time enables critical infrastructures. And then when I say time, this is the time of day, okay, kind of, wristwatch time, if you will. It certainly shows up in data centers. It shows up in power grids, power grid communications. It has a very significant role in financial exchanges in terms of the accuracy of timestamps. And you find it in wireline and wireless communications and so forth. You really find time everywhere out there that it's really important. So why, you might ask, is time so important, or keeping an accurate time so important in all these different infrastructures? And it has to do with the fact that all these infrastructures have servers and workstations and routers and the like, and they all have a clock. And the problem is clocks drift, okay? And they drift at different rates. And so it's a little like herding cats. They're just kind of all going at different speeds relative to one another. And so you might ask, well, how come? Why is that? Well, inside each router or workstation server, what have you, is an oscillator. An oscillator is a little device that vibrates, if you will. It goes back and forth. A certain number of vibrations constitute a second, okay? And the problem with an oscillator is they tend to be temperature sensitive, particularly the lower quality oscillators you find in servers and workstations. And so as the temperature changes, so does the frequency of the oscillator, which basically means the clock speeds up and slows down as the temperature changes. And then there's also some issues on how some manufacturers intentionally dither the clock. They want to change that frequency so that their emissions are lower. Power saving modes affect oscillator frequency. And then the truth is, the little quartz crystals inside these oscillators, they age, which means that the frequency changes over time. And if the frequency changes, that means the clock speed will change over time. So the fundamental problem is you have a lot of clocks. They're all very poor timekeepers, and you want to find a way where you can set them all to the same time and then keep them at that correct time, because they all want to drift at a different rate. And so that is the big idea there on the problem we're trying to solve. So why are we trying to solve this problem in general? Well, if you were to look at the general landscape for enterprise timing, there's a lot of different parts that need accurate timing. And if we were to kind of couch this in one sentence, it'd be like you need accurate, secure, and reliable time of day for servers, routers, and applications for improved network operations and business operations. So what are network operations and business operations? Well, it's, as I mentioned, probably the most commonly cited reason why customers buy a network time server. It's for log file timestamp accuracy. I wish I could say it was something more glamorous, but the truth is, if you're an IT guy, a network engineer, whatever the case may be, all your servers and workstations and so forth are all generating syslog file type entries, and they're all being aggregated by network management systems. And it comes time to run a report. You want that report to be high integrity, and part of the high integrity is that all those logs you collected have a correct timestamp, and you can put them in the right order. It's as simple as that. And where this becomes super important is if there's a network problem or a network fault of some sort, that network engineer, he's going to immediately go to that network management system. He's going to run a report, and he's going to want to know what happened, when, where, and why. And if his timestamps are not properly coordinated and organized for his network management system, he's not going to get a good result. The first thing he's going to have to do is he's going to have to get all his timestamps aligned, or excuse me, all his log files aligned properly so that he can get meaningful information from his network management system report, so he can then, find the details on the fault and fix it as soon as possible. So I venture to say just about every customer you talk to that's an IT admin or network engineer will tell you how important those log files are to them. And then, there's other areas. Network security has various aspects that use proper timing. For example, Windows uses something called Kerberos, and that's where the time on a client has to be within a certain accuracy of a server. Otherwise, the client can't log into the server. That's a common one. I mentioned real world values before. People care that their email has the right timestamp or the phone system has the right time on it. Or when you look at the time on your monitor, you got the right time down there in the corner, right? And then of course there's business transaction timestamps, when was an order placed and, just keeping track of activity in the right order in which it happened. And certainly in general network operations, there's things like, making sure you back up at particular times of the day or the week or the night, whatever the case may be, in the right order. Windows Directory Services uses time throughout the hierarchy. And then there's aspects of legal and regulatory. For example, in stock trading, there's MiFID II and FINRA requirements that say that the accuracy of your timestamps on your trades has to be within, say, 100 microseconds. So for auditing purposes, they can come in and make sure that you're not cheating in some way. All right, and so that's very, very important. So as we go along, let's swing back around to sort of the process that customers go through when it comes to timing. If you look at the triangle there, and that triangle, let's say that just represents all the enterprise networks that are out there, and there's a lot of them. The lower part of that triangle there are small networks. Timing's not critical, and that's probably the vast majority of them, actually. They don't have very many servers. If something goes wrong, the logs aren't important anyways. They know where the failure was and so forth. But as an organization tends to grow, they begin to realize that time is more important. And so the obvious place to go is to get your time for free from the internet, right? But then as the organization continues to grow and they realize that are dependent on very accurate time, they realize you really can't trust time off the internet so much. And you really need to get that time inside your firewall, providing very accurate timestamps. It's under your control. And that's when those customers that are getting it for free generally make the move to put a time server inside their firewall on their network. So it's a progression. So I bring this out because if you're talking to a customer and you ask him, hey, are you getting time for free off the internet? He says, yes. Well, they're a good candidate then to go the next step if, accuracy, reliability, and security are important to them to put a time server on the network. So who buys these things? Well, I mean, if you're selling them to Ingram, you know who you've sold to, but I thought I'd just give you a sort of a more macro view. So here's a list of a whole bunch of different customers. I mean, we sell these things to thousands of customers, but I kind of picked out some of the more well-known names. So let me just run through a few of these. You take Benjamin Moore Company, right? They make paint, right? But they've got a big network. They've got a lot of servers. There's an IT guy there that knows the importance of log file timestamp accuracy. And so a big paint company, buys time servers. The Walt Disney Company, Federal Aviation, it's an airport administration buys them. You get colleges like Indian River State College or, Los Angeles Unified School District. These organizations have a lot of servers and they run networks and, they recognize the importance of getting accurate time into those networks. You get healthcare companies, and broadcasting companies. Oil companies, Phillips 66. Another one that's kind of interesting is the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. So you probably think, well, why would the Indians, these folks care about accurate time? Well, certainly in the U.S., I would venture to say the majority of the casinos outside of the state of Nevada are owned by Indians. The bands of Indians, they're allowed to operate casinos on their reservations. And those casinos are filled with highly interconnected slot machines, and they have cameras everywhere. And all these cameras and all these slot machines, they all need to be precisely time-stamped. So they are keeping really good records of everything that's going on these rather complex networks inside these casinos. At any rate, it gives you an idea we sell these things across the board to all kinds of companies. They all have the same thing in common, and that is they have probably a fair number of servers, and something to do with the accuracy, reliability, and security is important. So with that, let's just jump in and start looking at the S600 itself. So here's the unit. You might be familiar with selling it. You might not be. I'm not sure. Hopefully after this presentation, you'll be a little more familiar with it. Maybe some aspects will be new. But it is pretty much the best-in-class NTP server and PTP Grandmaster out there. It's doing very well in the marketplace. Customers love the product, and so let me just walk you through the product and the web interface a little bit and some of the features and functions on it. So of course it has a front panel. Why do we even put a front panel on it? It's rather rare in a 1U network device these days, but people like to know that it's working, and the easiest way to if it's working is if you're near it, you can look at it and you can see the time. All right. The other thing where it's useful is when you first pull it out of the box, you want to put it on the network. The front panel is useful to give it an IP address, get it going on the network. Lastly, the other good use case for it is if the device is sitting in a data center far away and you need to have the data center people look at the device for some reason, it's useful to be able to go up to the front panel and press the status buttons and get some information just by walking up to it without having to log into it. On the back panel of it, certainly it's got power supplies, single dual power supplies. I'll go into more detail on that. We'll talk more about the network ports. It has 4 network ports, but it's not a switch. Data comes in on a port and it goes back out on that port. So in effect, when you look at those 4 ports, you're looking at effectively 4 time servers, because each port can be set up with its own IP address, subnet mask, and gateway. So that lends itself very well to interoperability to different network topologies, and distributing the load on the network, all coming into each of these different independent ports. LAN management, the management of the device is only on LAN 1 for security purposes. And of course, there's some other typical console connectors, and then of course the connector to connect up the GNSS cable and antenna. If we were to take the top off of this thing, I'll just kind of walk you around this briefly. You've got a motherboard sitting here, all with hardware timestamping. On this product, everything is hardware timestamped. It improves the accuracy of it. It has a GPS receiver built inside. That's right there. I'll talk more about that and give you a little demo on that. That's pretty cool. The power supply, single or dual corded, and then of course you can put in oscillator upgrades so that you get better performance in the event the GPS goes away. So I'll talk a little bit more about the rubidium atomic clock that you can put in here, or you can put in an upgraded OCXO, and that would mount right here on the board. Of course, it has a web interface, as you've seen. The whole idea here is not everybody wants to necessarily do command line interface, read the manual, and so forth. So it has a very intuitive web interface. You just navigate your way down the left side menus to configure it, and it's very straightforward. I think we'll probably have some time for a demonstration, and I'll just walk you through a live operating sync server here that I have in my office and show you how it works. It's kind of interesting. But of course, the big idea is, like from the dashboard, you just get a quick glance that everything is, good. Green is good. It's operating at Stratum 1 mode, satellite information and so forth. I also get asked, will it work on a smartphone? And the answer is, yeah, it will. Don't necessarily recommend it. It's a little small, but most IT network engineers, they're going to be looking at the thing through a browser interface on a larger screen, anyways. So, you've heard Lee mention this several times already in this conversation, and that is I have found consistently when talking to customers that one of these 3 things are going to be important to them. Either the accuracy of the time that they need on their network, the security of the time, or the reliability. For example, if you're talking to someone doing stock trading, accuracy and reliability are paramount. The reason being is accuracy of the timestamps for their transactions and coordinating the activities of all their servers with respect to time is really critical. And then, of course, it has to be reliable because it has to work through the trading day, right? From the time the exchange opens until the time it closes. If you're talking to a bank, security. It's all about security. That's the singularly most important thing. The accuracy is good enough. They're not so concerned about reliability, man, but if you're a bank, and of course, we like banks that are concerned about security because they hold our money. Certainly security is very important to them. And then the aspect of reliability. So what I thought I'd do here is just kind of walk through a few of these things for you and kind of just give you a glimpse on how well the sync server meets these requirements. So let's talk about accuracy and precision. Sometimes they get kind of used interchangeably, but the truth is they are different. If you look at over there, those little targets on the right side of the screen, you can see an example of something that's precise, a good little grouping of dots, but it's not very accurate. It's not on the bullseye. But then you can have, the dots that are around the bullseye, but they're not very well centered. So yeah, you could say, okay, on average, it's accurate, but it's certainly not very precise. And what the sync server offers is both accuracy and precision. It's an extremely accurate clock that can timestamp quite accurately all the NTP packets that are coming in. So when we say timestamp, what time do we mean? And we mean UTC. That's called Universal Time Coordinated. And you may or may not know this, but every server, router, workstation, your phone, internally in all these devices, they all synchronize to UTC. UTC, you might think of it as Greenwich Mean Time or whatever, but it's planet-wide, it is the same time. Now, local time is accommodated by your computer or your phone, wherever it is, and it tells you what time it is for you locally. But internally, in time inside your device, all time transfers are happening to UTC. So a network time server, it will timestamp all packets to UTC. And how accurately does it do that? Well, the official specification on a sync server is less than 15 nanoseconds to UTC. That's 15 billionths of a second to UTC. Typically, we're somewhere around 5 nanoseconds. So it is an extremely accurate clock. So that's kind of a nice aspect, and that's pretty well covered if anyone's concerned about accuracy. So the next thing is, well, you're using GPS to help get the time and steer the local clock and so forth. What happens if GPS goes away, right? How accurate is the clock then? Well, that's why we offer these oscillator upgrades. In the event, say lightning hit the building and damaged the cable or damaged the antenna, the IT guy still wants accurate time for his network. And so what he'll do is he will purchase either an OCXO, when he orders the device, he'll order an upgraded oscillator, either like an OCXO or a rubidium. And what that does is if GPS is not available, it could be as simple as disconnecting the cable accidentally, the clock will still keep accurate time. How accurate is a function of the oscillator. So the standard oscillator in the first 24 hours will drift about 400 microseconds, 400 millionths of a second. But it starts drifting faster, and after like a couple weeks, it's going to be off a fair bit. But if you upgrade to an OCXO or rubidium, it doesn't drift as fast. In particular, like a rubidium, within the first 3 days, if you disconnect GPS, it will only drift about 3 millionths of a second. So the rubidium can really help keep accurate time in the event there's a problem with the GPS and you need to do something like if the antenna were damaged, you need to order a new antenna and it may take a week, no problem. If you have a rubidium oscillator installed, the network's barely going to drift at all and it gives you plenty of time to fix the problem. That's why people put these advanced oscillators into their products. And also, accuracy is a function of how well you can deliver it to the timestamp or the request. And that's where, having hardware-based timestamps makes all the difference. So with that, I thought I would turn my webcam on and I'd give you a little demonstration, or actually I'd show you, if you will, what one of these little miniature atomic clocks looks like. So hi, everybody. I'm Paul. So right here is one of these miniature atomic clocks that goes inside the sync server if you buy the rubidium option. And you can see, I'm holding it in my hand. It's not very big, all right? And so let's open it up and see what's inside. Oops, dropped it. See what's inside of there. Okay, so here's what's inside. So what we're looking at right here is It's like a little metal can, and inside is a glass bulb. And that glass bulb is filled with rubidium gas. Okay, so that's where our atoms are inside this glass bulb right here. Right over here, I've got a little light source. And this, if you look kind of right here, I'll move it a little closer. There's like a little hole in this can. There's a little lens right there. And what we do is this light source shines light into the glass bulb that's inside this metal can. And on the other side over here is a photon detector. And essentially, we're able to measure the effective frequency, if you will, of those atoms by exciting them and seeing how they absorb photons, and keep a very, very stable oscillator. It's not very temperature sensitive, and if you disconnect GPS, the atoms, of course, still exhibit the same behavior, and you can have a very stable frequency output for the oscillator. So at any rate, I just thought I'd show you one of those. It's not every day that you see an atomic clock or the inside of one. Okay, so let's keep going. So we talked about accuracy. Let's talk about security now. So let's just kind of just start with a couple of things just built into the product itself. And one of them is going to be those 4 ports. Each one of those ports is independent. Data that goes in does not come out any of their ports. They're very isolated from one another. LAN number 1 can do the management, and management is only available on LAN 1. It'll also do timing. But LAN 2, 3, and 4 are timing only. And so you can make those IP addresses available to the network. People can get their time, but they can't get it in or access or manage the device through those ports. I mentioned that we have a security menu in here. We put all the security aspects of the product on one particular menu in one place. And just to highlight a few of the things there, when it comes to management, basically it's only on LAN 1. The device is set up to protect the CPU from denial of service attacks. For the web interface, you can put in custom certificates. You call it X.509 certificates. Larger organizations install these from their internal security certificate authority. Probably the most common security aspects that people might want to upgrade to is TACX Plus, Radius, and LDAP. Right? Those are some authentication protocols that are used, common in larger organizations. And of course, every single port can have its own access control list. So you can really, really clamp down on the security of the device. And certainly from a timing perspective, the NTP reflector, which I'll talk about a little more coming up, really adds a lot of security to the time stamping aspects of the product in general. And there's some NTP authentication functions as well. So let's talk a little bit about this security, and I bring this up mainly because there's an option called the security protocol option, and it's pretty much the most popular software option sold on the unit. And we kind of made it so it's fairly easy for you and the customers to figure out what you get and what you don't get with the option. So if you look at this list here, okay, this is the drop-down menu for security inside the sync server. You can see that I put a dark line here about halfway down. So everything above the line is standard security that comes in the product. Everything below the line is what you get if you buy the security protocol option. So what do you get for free or included in the product? You get MD5 authentication, you get the access control list, which is different for each port. Nice customization there. You get the packet limiting so that you can't effectively do a denial of service attack by overrunning the CPU on the device. For the security protocol option, that extra option that someone can add to this, you get the reflector. Like I said, I'll go into that more in a minute. You get another NTP function called AutoKey. But probably the most important thing is the most popular aspects is that in a larger organization, they're probably using TACX Plus if they're a Cisco organization, or Radius or LDAP if they're into the Microsoft Active Directory. So these are a lot of value to larger organizations. And then of course the certificates that I mentioned that give you a good secure web interface connection. Okay, so going on to the last one, reliability. probably thinking, okay, you have, we all like reliability, right? But what does reliability mean when it comes to a time server? It means two things. One, it means it was designed to be a reliable device, and also timing reliability. Because remember, to the customer, the most important thing is that when he requests the time, he gets an accurate time stamp back. That's what this is all about, right? So if we look at the timing, part of it is capacity. The time server can handle, through the NTP reflector, it can handle up to 360,000 NTP requests per second. That's a staggering number of requests per second. No organization would need that many. But the point being, though, if you ask for the time, you will get it back because that's line speed NTP operations. Certainly upgrading the oscillator for holdover for reliability in the event that time via GPS is not available. We can cross-check the time using NTP. And then, of course, having multiple constellations adds some reliability in where you're getting your time from out of the sky. So I'll go into a little more detail on those in some future slides. From a design standpoint, you wouldn't think of it, but the product has a wide temperature range, minus 20 to 65 degrees C. Now, a data center, of course, is never that, but to support such a wide temperature range, we had to put in higher quality, higher reliability electronic parts. So as a result, the product overall is just more reliable. And if you put it into a data center environment that's fairly temperature controlled, that's the best of all possible worlds. So at any rate, it contributes to the overall reliability. Certainly having dual power supplies is a reliability issue when it comes to either the power going into the unit or the power supplies themselves. And then we test this for vibration. Okay, mil standard A10G, we shake this thing, we make sure it'll survive shipping, earthquake, altitude, all kinds of things to make sure it's rugged enough to certainly get to you, the customer, in one good piece working condition, and then possibly the environment, like on a plane or in a ship or wherever it might wind up, it can handle that environment as well. Oftentimes customers go, well, what's the MTBF on the product? And if you look at all the different configurations that are sold, essentially it ranges from about 20 to 34 years. That's the mean time between failure. That's quite good. So generally, one of these devices wouldn't be in service for 20 years anyways, because 20 years from now, the network will have moved on, they will have upgraded speeds and feeds, and the time server will have been replaced, most likely within the next 20 years. Very reliable. So wrapping up this section right here, then just kind of the key benefits of the product. It's best in class time server. High availability with NTP is really important to customers. Customers want to request the time and get an accurate timestamp back. So you get this good accuracy, good holdover. With the 4 ports, you get a nice adaptation, interoperability with their network topologies that they may have in place. The environmental specs certainly help out in the environment that it's working in, as well as contributing to the reliability of the device. There's a lot of hardware features that are built in that are there standard, that with a software option enables those hardware features. I'll talk about those coming up, things like the GPS receiver and the PTP. It's secure. And of course, everyone likes something that's easy to use, and the web interface really answers that. So I thought I would present to you some popular configurations that Ingram sells. Okay, so let's just walk to a couple slides here, and you'll kind of see what's most popular and how to maybe do a little more upselling. So for Ingram, of course, when you're selling an S600, you need to present to the customer some choices. They have to have a power supply choice, either a single or dual power supply. And the other hardware choice is going to be the oscillator, like we've talked about. Does the customer going to be satisfied with the standard oscillator, or should they upgrade to one that gives them better holdover? And then there's some software option choices as well. The security protocol option, the PTP master, the GNSS option, and the PTP input. So what is Ingram selling here? I aggregated the data, and for the most part, about 40% of the units sold have a single power supply. Okay, so when it comes to that particular hardware choice, that's pretty common selection. About 20% have the dual power supply, which is still pretty good. Then about 20%, about 1 out of 5, goes for the rubidium upgrade. And that's, that's pretty good. Overall, for Microchip sales of sync servers, our number's a little higher, but not a whole lot higher. So you're doing a good job there. But certainly it represents an opportunity to, talk to customers about, putting a dual power supply or rubidium in there and the benefits of having each one of those. And then, of course, there's a whole mix of other things that account for about the other 20%. But just thought I'd let you know what you guys are selling, and you're doing a good job. Thank you. So let's just kind of walk through some of these hardware choices and some of these software choices and why you might want to do them. So let's start with the dual corded power supplies. If I think, oh yeah, okay, you got 2 power supplies. One fails, the other takes over. And, simplistically, that's true. But we went above and beyond that. So, some organizations have 2 sources of power in the racks themselves. So if one source of power goes down, you still have the other source. That's where the dual corded aspect comes in. The second thing is, of course, we have 2 power supplies in there. And so what we do is we load level the work, if you will, on each one of those power supplies so that one is not taking all the load and the other's in reserve. They're both carrying a lightweight load because we split it between them. That helps both power supplies last longer, actually. And so if one of the cords is unplugged, no problem. You're still able to get your power on the other cord from that power supply, or if one power supply fails, the other one takes over. It's all hitless, it's all automatic, and of course there's an SNMP trap. When there's any kind of change happening on the power supply, the operator is immediately known and notified. So, and also they lock. So that's one more thing. They don't fall out. So. Let's talk about the oscillator upgrades. I think I covered this one pretty well. You have 2 choices. You have the rubidium that I showed you, and then an OCXO. And the main reason why someone's going to do this is, if GPS goes away, cable disconnected, let's say, the time server is still going to keep the time, and all the devices on the network are still going to synchronize to that time. So the whole network is sort of drifting now collectively. And so it really just becomes a question of, for the IT guy, how far is he, willing to let it drift? And the main thing that these upgraded oscillators do is they buy that IT guy time to fix the problem, period. You put a rubidium in, and you lose the antenna due to a lightning strike, the thing can go 2 weeks and the network will never know that it's been in holdover because the rubidium atomic clock is so accurate. So when we look at some of the security protocol option, I think I covered this one reasonably well. Again, TACX, Radius, LDAP seem to be the most popular reasons to add the security protocol option to the product. But it does have that reflector in there. So I thought I'd just give you a little graphic here on how this thing works and why it's pretty cool. So inside the sync server, imagine you have a green chip. It's an FPGA, actually. It sits right there and looks at all the inbound traffic. And then deeper in the unit, you've got the CPU. And so you have the network, and let's say there's lots of clients, NTP clients, and they're sending NTP packets to the time server. This bit of hardware looks at the inbound packets, and if it's an NTP packet, it puts a timestamp on it and sends it right back out. It's a very accurate timestamp, and it can do this at line speed. That's where the 360,000 packets a second come in. But the big advantage of the reflector is not the fact that it can timestamp so many packets. It's that any non-NTP traffic that comes in is dropped. So it's a huge security advantage. It protects that CPU from someone trying to hack their way in and get to the CPU, because if it's not an NTP packet, it gets dropped. So it works like a little hardware firewall. Now, granted, a few packets will get through like a ping or an ARP or something like that. But by and large, it's a really huge security advantage to do the job of network timestamping for NTP, but protect the box overall. So that's those are the key advantage of it right there. When we talk about PTP, so most organizations use NTP, Network Time Protocol. PTP is generally deployed when you really need high accuracy timekeeping. Okay, not that many customers need it yet. It gets used a lot in telecommunications and stock trading, stuff like that. It's beginning to show up in power utilities. But the sync server, of course, can support PTP. We can support it as a grandmaster. It's just a single option, and you can do PTP on any of the ports with hardware timestamping. You can support all these profiles. Different aspects of the protocol are supported. The big advantage, of course, nanosecond caliber timestamps, high capacity. Trading firms tend to use it. From your perspective, the thing that's worth mentioning to a customer would be that all the hardware is in every single sync server to do PTP Grandmaster hardware timestamping operations. It's just a software option that enables all that hardware that's already in every single sync server. So that's when it operates as a master. It can also operate as a client. Okay, and you might do this where your primary source of time is GPS, but you might want PTP as a backup. So in the event that the GPS cable is disconnected, you're not ready to go use the oscillator yet. You just want your time to stay good and accurate for a period of time. You have a PTP as an input to take care of that. So, an example of this might be someone has a couple time servers. They're both tracking GPS. And you set each one up as a master and each one up as a client. And they synchronize to one another. And you have their inputs prioritized. So if GPS goes away on this one, no problem. It can get time from this one with PTP very accurately and just continue on, the job of timestamping NTP packets for customers. So works as a good backup to GNSS, which is a good lead in to the GNSS option. So inside the sync server is a receiver that tracks GPS, but with this option, it can also track other constellations that are out there. Now, the U.S. is not the only one to put up one of these GNSS systems. Russia has years ago with one called GLONASS. China's building out one called Beidou, and the Europeans are putting one up called Galileo. And they'll effectively do the same thing. They all have atomic clocks on the satellites. They all help find positionings on our phones and all cars and all kinds of different applications. And so why would we care about this as a clock? Well, there's one clear advantage that having more satellites available really helps, and that's in an urban canyon environment. So it's one thing when your antenna sits on the roof and there's no other buildings around and it can see the whole sky. Lots of satellites available. I'll show you in a minute, no problem. But if you're in an urban canyon and there's tall buildings around you, well, you may only be able to see the sky up and down the street. And there may not be enough GPS satellites to get a good position fix or a good time. And so when you have the GNSS option, you're able to pick up more satellites that are available in that bit of sky that you can see. Okay. And so the big advantage then of this option is essentially you have more satellites, and that gives you, in an urban canyon environment, the ability to lock and get accurate time when you just have a limited view of the sky. Okay, and you can track, multiple constellations at the same time. I'll show you there. I think we'll have enough time. I'll give you a quick demo and show you tracking some satellites on a real sync server here coming up. So kind of wrapping up this part here, the key sync server S600 benefits, right? I mean, you can synchronize millions of clients. No one needs to do that. But the big point is you can accurately do it. It's high availability for however many NTP clients they have. You can accurately timestamp whatever load they send to the time server. A lot of security choices on the product between hardening features that are standard and those you can upgrade to through the security protocol option. It's a real advantage. And, the NTP hardened security solutions offered by the Reflector. It's reliable. Everyone wants to be able to get a timestamp when they request it. And at the same time, customers basically say they want to forget they own the product. And the best way to do that is have the product be very reliable. It keeps operating, 24/7, year in and year out. And in fact, they want to forget they own own the product. It works so reliably. And of course, everyone wants something that's easy to use. And a couple big features there is having multiple ports to fit into their topology, as well as an easy to use interface. Okay, so with that, let me just kind of cover some key resources that are available to you in selling the Sync server. A lot of web resources out there. There's data sheets, there's application notes. You can get the user guide, miscellaneous quality documents like declaration of conformity and those types. The MIB is out there. If someone just wants to see the MIB or get a copy of it, it's all online. Software releases are out there. There's dimensional drawings, so a lot of data sheets having to do with the options and so forth. Application notes. When it comes to the drawings, some people want the 2D drawings. Some people actually want the 3D CAD models. Those are out there as well for SolidWorks and IGS and STEP. Just download it. We make it everything we can think of available. And lastly, the easiest thing here is if you want to get to the web page quickly, you can go to microsemi.com and navigate through a lot of menus, or you can just Google Sync Server S600 Microsemi, and boom, you're right there at the Sync Server S600 web page. Frankly, that's usually what I do. And if you have any questions, any technical questions, the go-to guy is Tom Kremer, and that's his email address. It's easy, tom.kremer@microchip.com. And Tom is an expert in the Sync server, can answer any questions that you could think of asking. And of course, if you stump him, go to R&D and get the details. But I'm certain Tom can help support you in any questions that you might have having to do with the Sync server. And lastly, of course, we all like contests. We all like the opportunity to get cash money. And so there's a contest, a Microchip contest coming up on October 5th through the 30th. So it's going to start here in about a week and a half. You get 2 contest entries for recommending the Sync server S600, and you earn an extra contest entry if you recommend the applicable warranty with the 600. And so I've been told there's a bunch of money behind this, and it's an opportunity to recommend the product and get some cash in the process doing it. So I just want to encourage all of you to keep an eye out for that. That's the flyer there, and like I said, it starts in about a week and a half. So with that, that brings me to the end of what I had here from a PowerPoint perspective. Are there any questions I might be able to answer at this time? We always want to know how we can help you be more successful in selling the Sync server. Perhaps some resources we can send you. Let me know. So at this point, I kind of go open mic. Anybody have any questions that come to mind that I could answer for you right now?
Do we have the ordering SKUs for the S600 that is DC powered?
The S600 that is DC powered is, in short, no. The reason reading is it's a custom configured unit. The S600s are all pre-configured with a SKU so that you can just book ship. But the DC power supply version is a custom configured unit, and it's not a good fit for selling through distribution. It gets a bit complicated in trying to order it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah.
Just a question. What's the country of origin of this server?
USA. It's TAA compliant.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I tell you what, you might have some other questions. I can circle back around. I'm just kind of want to pay attention to the time and honor your time. But since I have a few more minutes, I thought I would just show you a quick demonstration of a Sync server. So on the screen right now is essentially the web interface that you see when you log into a Sync server. This particular Sync server is sitting in my office in front of me right here, my little home office, if you will, and the antenna is next to the window. It's not a very good antenna location, but you'll get to learn a little bit more about it. So I'm going to start on this demo. I want to just show you, so of course, here's the dashboard, okay? It gives you a quick at a glance. It tells me pretty much everything's green in terms of the satellite. It says I have an alarm. I'll explain that alarm in a minute. I can quickly go over here, get status information, tells me what's going on. It tells me I'm following GNSS. NTP is an input, PTP is not. Okay. If I want to see what's happening on the satellites, I just go over here, and this is my satellite activity. So I tell you what, I'm just going to digress here a little bit and show you a little bit more about the satellites around my house. So this is a polar plot, and I of course have an antenna sitting next to a window, and the center of the plot is straight above my house. Okay, the perimeter around here is the horizon. Okay, so if I look from straight up down to the horizon, I'm essentially looking from straight up down to the horizon. So right now, outside my window, are all these satellites. The blue ones are the GPS satellites. For example, that's space vehicle number 25, and the power, the carrier to noise ratio is 28, and it gives you the elevation and azimuth of where that satellite is. So if I have the ability to see satellites from my house, I can walk out and see these things, right? So the red ones, those are the Russian satellites. It's important to note that these satellites orbit the Earth twice a day. They're not stationary. They're always moving, so they're coming and going. And so this map will change throughout the day. Then there's the Galileo satellites are in gray. A couple interesting ones. We do pick up what's called an S-band satellite. This green one is above the equator. This is the only one that'll always be in the same spot. And then this one over here is a QZSS satellite. It's kind of interesting. That satellite is one of, I think, of about 4 satellites that run a figure-8 pattern over Japan down to Australia and back. It's called a quasi-zenith satellite. But sure enough, this satellite right now is above Japan somewhere. And it's very low, of course, on my horizon. I'm in California, the western part of North America, and can see a satellite low on the horizon that happens to be over Japan. So those are the satellites I'm currently seeing. So I go to the dashboard. I go back to GNSS. It's color coded. So these are all the GPS satellites I'm seeing. And this is essentially, think of this like the signal strength. It's a relatively low signal strength because I'm picking this up through a window. The signals are being reflected off, cars or light poles or neighbors' roofs or whatever. But you get an idea of all the different constellations. The blue is GPS, the gray is going to be Galileo, the red is going to be the Russian satellites. Okay, so I've got an alarm going. So why do I have an alarm? So if I come down here and I go to alarm, I can get lots of detail at other places in the product, but right now, this just gives me a quick overview from the dashboard. It tells me I have a GNSS signal low, which would be what I would expect because, this antenna is not on the roof. It's sitting inside my house, and it doesn't see any sky, quite frankly, because my shades are drawn. So I get a really low signal strength. And so it's just telling me, hey, there's satellites there, but wherever your antenna is, you're not getting a good signal. You might think about correcting it. At any rate, if you look over here on the left side, if I wanted to configure this unit, it's very straightforward. You just work your way down the list. First thing, of course, you'd want to do would be to connect the network. You go to Ethernet. It's very straightforward. LAN 1 through LAN 4. You pick your speeds, IPv4 or IPv6, whether you want DHCP or not, put in some static addresses, hit apply, you're done. Any IT guy could do this without opening the manual. This is very, very obvious for a network engineer or IT admin. And then, there's various things having to do with configuring NTP. If he wants to do something above and beyond standard. Standard is it'll serve NTP automatically as soon as it connects to GPS. I did want to point out this holdover though. So I go over to this holdover page, and right here you can see that in this unit I have a standard oscillator that's been installed. And I might go, it might take me 10 days to get a new antenna. So how accurate will this be if the antenna is hit by lightning and I have to get a new one and it may take 10 days? So I put 10 in here, and the clock will be off by we estimate about 43 milliseconds over 10 days on a standard oscillator. Now, to some customers, that may be great. the whole network shifted by 43 milliseconds. That's perfect. For some customers, that's not acceptable, and they'll need a rubidium because they have to be more accurate than, 100 microseconds like a stock trading firm. But at any rate, this is where the customer can configure either the accuracy and how much time they have. For example, let's say I didn't want to be more than 20 milliseconds off. Well, that'll take about between 6 and 7 days on a standard oscillator before I'm off by about that much. So the guy knows, okay, if something happens to the antenna, I have about a week to fix this problem. So at any rate, you can just make your way down the list, just configuring various things. It's fairly intuitive through the web interface, and then off you go. It just does its job, and you point clients at the time server, and it'll respond with timestamps. So it's very, very straightforward and easy from that regard. At any rate, that brings to a close of everything that I wanted to talk about and show for this session. Are there any other questions or anything that I could answer for you while we're still online?
I do have one. Is the web interface, does it grant you the option to manage more than one sync server, or is just like the specific address that's for the specific equipment? It's just trying to see, in some cases they may have 3-4 of these units. I was trying to verify if there's any centralized management.
No, it's a per device, so it's the web GUI into that specific instrument. Okay, it's not a single web GUI that interfaces a whole bunch. It's not a management program. Each individual sync server has its own individual web GUI. But for the customer, we do allow them to name the sync servers. So if they happen to have more than one web GUI up at a time, they can tell which is which. And also, you can save the config from a sync server and upload it into another one, so you don't have to retype all the or reconfigure the unit. You can just effectively clone it by doing save restores from one to another. It's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I want to again thank you for your time here today. My contact information is there as well. If you have any other questions and good technical questions, a guy that's there almost dedicated solely to answering your questions and supporting you would be Tom Kremer as well. And there's his email address as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time and attention today, and good luck on the contest coming up in October. I hope you all win. So.
Thank you much for the training. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Thanks for all the helpful information.
Thank you.